You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies.
Hello, everybody. Welcome here to another edition of Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, a Rockies affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Skyler Timmons, fresh off of calling 4 college softball games. Evan, I'm just doomed to watch bad baseball in my life, but it wasn't that bad. And bad softball. It was bad baseball. And joined here, as always, by my co-host, Evan Lang.
How bad was it?
It wasn't bad.
Did the team you were calling win any of the games?
No, they got swept.
Oof.
In 4 games.
And was it 4 games all in one day? Or was it one game on Friday? Because you said they had canceled yesterday due to weather.
Softball does just 2 doubleheaders.
Okay.
On the weekends, on Saturday, Sunday. But no, on Saturday, we got 1 game in, and then the clouds rolled in, and then the snow rolled in, and then the clouds left, and the snow stopped. But the field was kind of wet, and then the clouds rolled in again, and the wind rolled in. But then it started to roll out, but then the umpires suspended that game because they were concerned about field conditions. It is a all-turf field. Because a couple of the other team's players slipped on the field. And so they suspended it. And so 3 games today. And that was after 1.5 innings. So, yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was cold and snowy yesterday up in my neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Watching a bunch of people who do not know how to drive in inclement weather.
Despite living here.
And it's like, I'm going down the highway. The highway's not that bad at all, but traffic is completely blocked up. We pass by, it's because somehow someone managed to spin out on the highway, despite the fact that the highway really was not icy.
Well, somehow Palpatine returned, Evan.
Somehow.
But we're going to think warm thoughts, boy, because this thermometer is mighty cold. But spring training officially underway. Pitchers and catchers have reported, all that good jazz. Rest of the team is trickling in as well, or everybody's basically there. But officially, everybody's there. And they'll have games starting this week, Evan, which is pretty dang exciting. Starts later this week, which is woohoo! Fun stuff on the 21st down in Scottsdale at Talking Stick at the Salt River Fields and all that good stuff. So that'll start later this week, and we'll finally have games to talk about, Evan.
Yeah, versus the Arizona Diamondbacks. This is one of the better. Like I am on record as not loving the month of February, but this part of February that we're in right here is probably the best of it because college baseball just started. Spring training is starting or coming up, and we are just rolling right up to finally having it be baseball season again, which I don't know about you, Skyler. I could really use some baseball in my life right about now.
Yeah. I can go without. I can give or take. No, it's good to have pitchers and catchers have reporting and everything, just the sounds of baseball back, getting videos and interviews and information starting to roll in from spring trainings. And it's nice to see you're seeing the banner of buy Rockies TV for $99.99. The best deal until May 1st, when we'll slash it probably because nobody's watching the games. But fun stuff. And I think coming in, I think the big question for this episode, we'll talk pitchers and catchers this episode, and then we'll start building in more and other stuff. But really, it's focusing here on pitching. Pitching is going to be the question for the Colorado Rockies, I think, more than anything, because it's the part of the team that they have such a hard time finding success with. It is the great stain on the organization throughout their history and the stigmata, everything of you can't pitch at Coors Field. It's hard to pitch at Coors Field. It's always going to be hard to find pitching. We can't sign pitching. We can't, all these things around pitching. And that's going to be the focus. And that's been the focus of theirs throughout their history, trying to figure out that important aspect of the game. And so coming into the spring training, Evan, I think the one question I wanted to ask you is, What is your level of optimism or just your outlook when you think about pitching in 2025 for the Colorado Rockies?
For pitching, it's going to be interesting because this is and we'll talk more about the bullpen later, but outside of the rotation, it is a young unit getting even younger by the day. And it's going to be really interesting because, throughout the Rockies history, it's always been they've had great individual performers, but the issue has always been the cohesiveness of the pitching as a unit. Like it doesn't really get recognized, but there were some really solid pitching performances last year, especially from young guys like Luis Peralta and Seth Halverson. But overall, the Rockies pitchers as a unit were one of the worst in baseball, if not the worst. And so the big thing I think is going to be, we know that there are going to be some solid individual performances in individual seasons, but it's going to be how good the Rockies pitchers are as a unit. No more of this worst ERA in baseball by like over a full point or anything like that. The Rockies need to start showing that they can build a pitching unit that is completely homegrown. And most of these guys are homegrown. The bullpen, they keep saying that they're going to sign some additional veteran, but they've still yet to do it. And right now, the bullpen is very, very young, with the exception of guys like Tyler Kinley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's the thing for me is when I think of the outlook, it's like, or if I think about my optimism level, it's maybe slightly, it's not too drastic, but it's like slight optimism's like a hint above what it normally is, which still isn't usually very high, but maybe slightly. Just knowing of specifically, I always think about the starting rotation where it's a known commodity. There are some highlights there. There's the depth that you hope can break through. It gets a little higher when we get to the bullpen, and there'll be a focus of a player projection later in this episode. But you look at it, and there's, like you're saying, there's things to like. There's highlights you can look at. As a unit, I'm still always going to be pessimistic because it's just the organization can always tout these things, but they haven't proved that they can do it consistently at the big league level with more than one or two guys that can cohesively push it forward. So I think the consistency is what's kind of forcing me to be a little more pessimistic, or at least a little more cautious entering the season.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it optimism about the Rockies pitching of what I have, but more of I am just really interested in seeing how it goes and how it develops. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting Rockies pitching to just suddenly knock everybody's socks off this year, but I think there's going to be a lot of interesting things to see both in spring training and as the season goes along when it comes to looking at how these pitchers perform, what they're doing, what the organization is doing, and going from there. Like, this is a rebuild year. It's a punt year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing that you try to look at. It's just, I think, keeping expectations in check and realizing, there's probably going to be sort of a lot of growing pains and still bad months. Our perspective of pitching is so skewed in Colorado. We're like, that guy's got a 4.5 ERA. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
When in reality, you're like,
Is his ERA under 5? It's a pretty solid season right there.
Well, I remember I wrote an article talking about, like, when I mentioned Joe Rock and like, oh, Joe Rock had a solid season in AAA. And so it was like, he had an ERA like over 5. That's not solid. And I was like, we're fans of the Colorado Rockies. That's good to us a lot of the time, which is kind of sad. But
yeah,
it comes with the territory.
Only 12 pitchers for the Rockies last year out of 33 had an ERA under 5.
Yeah, so pitching's kind of skewed, but it's...
And you get such sterling ERAs as 81, 54, 21.6, 15.43, 10.38.
Yeah, but I think when I think of that rotation, I just feel a little more pessimistic because we're getting the same old faces that we've had. Outside of Ryan Feltner, who, like, a lot of encouraging stuff from last season, the rest of it we're pretty much used to. Like, we've seen the highs of Herman Marquez, but we've also seen the lows. So a lot of these, we've seen both sides of them, where right now they're all just average pitchers, maybe even below average, but they're it's a rotation full of, at the moment, maybe 3, 4, 5 guys at the
Yeah.
moment entering the season.
And the Rockies keep saying, Chase Dollander, Carson Palmquist, Sean Sullivan, potentially, all have chances to try and make the rotation this year. But, that's not really something that I personally believe is going to happen. Sean Sullivan, we got news that he's slightly behind in his recovery from his offseason hip surgery, which is fine because Sullivan didn't pitch above AA last year. I'm not going to expect him to magically be ready to rock and roll, especially after having hip surgery. But, Carson Palmquist, and I would even say Chase Dollander, should have a chance. But at the end of the day, you still expect to go into this season with the same 5 that you've potentially been going into other seasons previously. Senzi, Marquez, Gomber, Freeland, Feltner. And that's not a terrible rotation. If everybody stays healthy and can pitch even, to their averages, that's a perfectly cromulent rotation right there. But it's not really, outside of people being healthy, I wouldn't really say it's anything to be super excited about.
Yeah, it's pretty, as the kids would say, mid.
Because at this point, we know who Kyle Freeland is. And I love K-Free, but we know who he is. And, same with Antonio Senzatela. I think the big guy to watch this year is going to be Erman, because you want to see how he recovers from Tommy John. And, he keeps saying that he's in a really good place physically, but that's what he was saying at this time last year.
Yeah.
He made it back. He pitched 4 innings and was immediately out the rest of the season.
Yeah. And you think like the starting rotation with these guys, and because we'll dive more into the bullpen later, so we'll just focus on our stars right now. But the Rockies hold on to a glimpse of a guy that they saw in one season. They focus on that, and this is beyond just the pitchers. They do it with the players too. They look at a snapshot of what a guy did one time instead of what they're currently doing or what they've done historically. We'll look at, they'll sign a hitter and, this guy was good back in 2019. He was an all-star that year. Well, he's hit 200 since then and is bounced up and down between AAA. That type of thing with Brendan Rodgers, and fans will do this too. Guy was a Gold Glover in one season. That was pretty much an outlier for him defensively. Otherwise, he's pretty, maybe slightly above average or pretty average. So that's what it feels like they keep doing with this rotation is Freeland. He was a Cy Young Award candidate in 2018. Yeah, and then you broke him, and he's been struggling to really establish or get back to that ever since, which is a good goal to have, but it seems out of his reach. Same with Senzatela. Had that one good year. We signed to that big extension. Hasn't pitched for him because of injuries, and when he has, okay. And so that's the hard thing.
Yeah, it's always going to be that Kyle Freeland argument of, Kyle Freeland was 4th place Cy Young candidate in 2018. That was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And ever since then, he has been, at best, a league average starter, which is fine. There's plenty of place on this rotation for a league average starter.
Across the league.
You can't have a rotation that is only league average or below league average pitchers. Like, if I had to go through and just based on past performances and what I think we can get out of them in the future, I would not pick all 5 of these guys. I would maybe go Erman and Kyle Freeland and Ryan Feltner.
Yeah.
Austin Gomber had a pretty solid first season when he first got here to Colorado and hasn't really been the same since. And he was fine last year. He was just fine.
He was healthy.
You can't build an entire rotation out of fine.
Yeah.
And expect to be a competitive team.
Yeah. And when you try to tell yourself as a draft and develop, and when 3 of your homegrown guys in that rotation are kind of okay, because that's Freeland, Senzatela, and Feltner, all varying degrees, but historically, at the moment, all pretty average. Maybe Feltner has the brightest upside, of the three, but that's what you've managed to really establish in your rotation, because Herman does not count as homegrown. He was up in 2016. So he is not a homegrown player, even though you drafted him and he made his debut with you. He is not a homegrown player.
I mean, we didn't even draft him. We traded for him from Tampa. And it's like, Skyler, I want you to give me a guess here of, let's go all the way back to 2015 as part of, I've been looking at the Rockies drafts. How many pitchers have the Rockies drafted from 2015 through 2024? So last 10 drafts. How many do you think they've picked?
There's a good number. They've taken a lot of pitchers. There's that one year where they took pretty much almost all pitchers.
There's been a couple of years like that.
Yeah. So I know it's quite a bit.
165.
Yeah.
And out of those pitchers, how many have made it to the big leagues and been effective at all?
Optimistic, I'll say 3.
So we can go back and look, and so guys who have made it to the bigs that are pitchers. You got Justin Lawrence and Peter Lambert. Justin Lawrence had one really good season, otherwise just struggled, and Peter Lambert is now out of the MLB and he's playing in Japan. And I know I shouldn't say the MLB, but I did. Sue me. Riley Pint only just made his debut in 2023, and he is no longer with the organization. Ben Bowden is barely in baseball at all right now. Rico Garcia is basically out of baseball. You just go through, and really, you've got maybe Lucas Gilbreth, who's been solid, but then had to get Tommy John surgery. You've got Ryan Feltner, and you've got, I would say, Jake Bird. That's pretty much it. And that's not great.
No, because especially when you think about, half those guys you've mentioned are like relievers, really. And the starters, So that's why, when you mention, it's a question I want to ask before we close here, is do you really believe that the Rockies will absolutely put Dollander on that roster if he does enough in spring training and performs well enough to legitimately earn that spot? Do you think the Rockies really would start him on the opening day roster?
No, because I think back to how many seasons we've gone, man, this guy really killed it this spring. He should be on the roster, and he's not.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the entirety of my Rockies fandom, there's so many examples of that, because it's just how the Rockies operate.
Yeah.
Even though, like, if Dollander really kills it this spring, do it. You have literally nothing to lose at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm, is like, when you follow the Rockies long enough and follow them deeply, and you just find that they're really good at the lip service part at sometimes, but it's always hard to take them at their word now. Like, they have to follow through. And with Dollander, it's hard to believe, because like we said, the rotation's pretty much set. Yeah, there's the concerns with Senzatella and Marquez about their arms and if they're healthy enough and everything, effectiveness. But I look at that group and none of them really like hit me as a bullpen piece, like Gomber maybe. But even then, they prefer him as a starter because he's struggled as a reliever. So there's nobody in that rotation. Even if they do struggle, none of them I feel like would be better off in the bullpen. No, maybe Senzatella could be like Ulysses Chacin.
Yeah.
And then that's like $12 million you're sticking in the bullpen for a pretty average pitcher.
Yeah, and it's none of them Senzi's got more of a limited arsenal, so he could maybe do better in the bullpen.
Yeah.
But I can't look at any of our guys in this supposedly set rotation and go, this is a guy that I think would do fine in the bullpen. I wouldn't want to put any of these guys in the bullpen.
Yeah, for better or for worse reasons.
Yeah, like the way Herman pitches, he is a starting pitcher. I cannot see him in the bullpen. Same for Freeland and same for Gomber. I think Feltner could maybe do fine, but with how he was last year, I think you want to give him every opportunity to be a younger starting pitcher that this organization really needs.
When he's a guy who can regularly throw 5-6 innings, and if he got on a roll, could definitely throw 7 innings on the regular.
Exactly.
So it's if you wanted to even open up the window a little more, maybe you don't bring back Gomber in arbitration, you just non-tender him, or things like that.
I mean, I was surprised that they didn't non-tender Gomber to begin with.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but yeah.
And I don't say that as a denigration of Austin Gomber. I like Austin Gomber, but I think it's pretty clear that he doesn't really have a future with the organization compared to some of these other guys. Yeah. Like, you know that they're going to keep K-Free because he's the homegrown kid and they love him. You know that, while Herman is potentially a free agent at the end of this season, there is a pretty strong possibility that if he performs well this season, they extend him because we know the organization really likes him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so who knows? But starting rotation is going to be interesting to watch in spring training because they've even talked about, Palmquist probably could come in as a reliever. Might put him in as a long reliever to break him in. That would be his avenue. But Dollander would be a starter. And who knows with that. So we'll see, but plenty to talk about here. But I think what we're having is optimism or outlook is on a scale of 1 to it's a Wouldn't you agree, Principal Skinner?
Yes.
Oh, see, he agrees.
So, after weeks of promising, it's finally here.
Finally here. What do you have to say about that, Sam?
Oh, my. Oh, hooray!
Oh, stupid. But we'll take a break here, and when we come back, player projection type stuff, starting with the catchers. So don't go anywhere. Plenty left to go here on Affected by Altitude. We're back here on Affected by Altitude. Skyler and Evan here talking pitchers and catchers in spring training, the pitchers and catchers episode. And moving on, we figured, let's talk a little bit about the catching situation. Do a player projection, kind of clump it in to maybe the 3 guys that are in that mix. And then, we've talked extensively about them all, but we'll just kind of tie it all into that conversation. And then later, after, in our third segment, we'll talk about the bullpen unit as a whole and kind of a player projection there of picking out bits and pieces in that bullpen and our expectations for the bullpen itself, because it's hard to kind of go one by one because it's the unit as a whole and you just plug in pieces to the body. So kicking off here with pitchers or with the catchers, Evan, let's talk about this catching unit and just situation coming into spring training where one spot is certain. Jacob Stallings is back. Exactly how much he plays and the load he handles is still to be determined. But the question is, what do they do beyond him and who's backing him up? So what's going on, Evan? What are we looking for here?
So what I can tell you to start is that my guess is that they right now going into the season with 2 young guys behind him are viewing Jacob Stallings as their starting catcher. Should they? Probably not, but he's the most experienced catcher on the team. He actually had a pretty good season last year, all things considered, was worth almost 1 win above replacement, had a pretty solid offensive season, and built a really strong relationship with the Rockies pitching staff. Jacob Stallings ideally is a backup catcher. I don't think he should be the starter. I think he does his best work as the backup catcher. He's the ideal backup catcher, in my opinion. I've written about that extensively. But for Stallings, you can't expect him to have as good a season as he did last year because it was kind of out of the ordinary for him for how good he did last year. And the projections agree with me in pretty much every level that he's going to come back down to earth a little bit. He's still going to get on base a decent amount. His strikeout rate's going to stay about the same. He's going to walk about the same, but he's just not going to get as many hits. And I think that's more than reasonable to expect just looking at his body of work. But Stallings, known commodity, 1-year contract with an option. whatever. What really is interesting is who's going to be the other catchers on the team, because there are 4 non-roster invite catchers, and pretty much none of them you can expect to be on the opening day roster. And that's Bryant Betancourt, Braxton Fulford, Roniker Palma, and Austin Nola. I don't think any of these guys are going to be on the opening day roster. I think Nola, if he stays with the team, is going to be in AAA Albuquerque, and the rest of the guys are going to be scattered across. So that really just leaves you with Hunter Goodman and Drew Romo. And what I can tell you about Hunter Goodman is they already have him in catcher's gear doing reps with the pitching staff at spring training so far. They are gearing up for Hunter Goodman to catch regularly for this team like they had him doing at the tail end of last season.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is they're trying to find somebody who can, because like you're saying, Stallings is not playing 100-plus games. He's going to play 80 games. Half the schedule, there's like he did last year with Elias Diaz pretty much most of the year, is split time behind the dish, and hopefully, in a sense, they don't have to cycle him into the DH spot, but just a veteran guy that can split time, and I think that's how a lot of teams do it nowadays, because catching is a very hard position. There's a lot of info, and there's only so many just absolute Iron Men behind the dish that can handle that workload and be productive at the plate, like a Salvador Perez, JT Realmuto, ton of those guys, and Adley Rushman.
Yeah.
But and luckily, as a side note, Evan, the DH, I think, has saved the catching position, the universal DH, because it allows them, they can get breaks more often and keep a bat and focus on offense every once in a while to stay fresh there and just turn their mind off.
Yeah.
And you can keep them in the lineup.
I mean, we saw them do that with Elias Diaz, who was, honestly, through most of his tenure as a Colorado Rocky, Diaz was sort of an Iron Man behind the plate. It wasn't really until last year that he struggled with those bilateral calf injuries and his production really declined. But we saw him when he wasn't behind the plate. He was at the DH spot. And I don't think we're going to see Stallings as the DH.
No.
But I do think we see Goodman as the DH a lot.
Yeah, and that brings up part here where we can... So that's the situation so far as we move into our projections here real quick. So you've really got these 3 guys, really 2 of them battling for the position. Austin Nola could, if something happens to the other 2 and he really impresses and they're like, we need another veteran behind the plate, I could see that being the scenario that he gets a call, but there's that outside chance, but there's always a chance. I think Braxton Fulford, it seems like they've been pretty impressed with him overall, but it's still, he's not on the roster, probably a little further on the depth chart. And then the other 2, like you're saying, just young guys that aren't quite ready to crack through, and you'll just give them an extra look for that depth piece, sorting out the depth chart.
Yeah. For Braxton, I definitely see him as the starting catcher for the Isotopes next year, or rather this season here in 2025.
Yeah.
He's going to start in AAA, and I think it's going to be him and Nola as the tandem out there, because unless Austin Nola really does well in spring training and somebody gets hurt, I just can't see him.
Jacob Stallings.
I just can't see him making the opening day roster.
Yeah. It would be a Rockies move if something happened to Stallings, like he gets injured, they would call up Austin Nola, because we can't trust Drew Romo. He throws weird. But that brings us to the backup spot. We've talked about Stallings projections, like you're saying, pretty pedestrian, 80, somewhere between 69 to 80 games, somewhere around there. No hits around 230, a 314 on base, 367 slugging, somewhere in that ballpark. 6 home runs, 33 RBI. So pretty much career numbers is what they're projecting for Jacob Stallings. We can accept that. 0.9 WAR, according to Fangraphs. Across the board, standard day at work for Jacob Stallings in his career,
which is fine. That's really all you need from him.
All you need from a catcher.
Yeah, especially if he's your backup catcher, that he can occasionally hit, and he's going to be a solid behind the plate presence.
Yeah, or that platoon bat where splitting time, he'll start 3 games during the week. The other catcher starts 3 games. There you go. That's pretty manageable. They did a lot better job this past season with him and Diaz because Rockies, that's why they got Stallings, is because they didn't want Diaz catching all those games. So to keep him fresher, they were swapping him in like that behind the dish. So expect that plan again, which makes the other half of this conversation so, I think, intriguing and important is who the heck is going to be the backup. Because like you said, two guys vying to be America's next top model behind the dish for the Colorado Rockies.
Yeah, and we got to figure out which one smiles with their eyes best.
Mm-hmm. It's Drew Romo.
I don't know. I think both of them have smile with their eyes just fine. But it is going to come down to Hunter Goodman versus Drew Romo. And honestly, you want my opinion, in an ideal world, both Goodman and Romo are on the opening day roster. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I think, if I'm being honest, my guess is they go with Hunter Goodman.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. And Patrick Saunders pretty much saying back on February 9th that Goodman is not likely to start more than twice a week as Colorado's catcher to begin the season. So it's an interesting one, and we'll start with him first. So Hunter Goodman, coming into the season, according to Fangraphs projections, putting him around 79. Zips has him at 116 games, which, holy cow. But somewhere in there, at least 80 games. I think that's pretty universally agreed upon in these projections. An average around 235 to 239, somewhere in there, a sub 300 OPS, somewhere between 280 and 290, and then a slugging around 450 to 460. That's what they've got him at. And putting up, 15, 16 home runs, somewhere in there, in those mid-teens, 38 ribbies. So, or 43 ribbies. So across the board, that's kind of where he's at.
Yeah, it's
projections.
I think a big part of it is looking at how his play was distributed last year. He spent a lot of time in right field last year, and I think he spends less time in right field this year. But I guarantee you they'll still throw him out there every now and then. So 27 games in right field, 23 as a catcher, 11 as a DH, 7 in left, and 4 at first base. I don't think we're going to see Hunter Goodman at first base. I think Michael Tolia pretty much has that position locked down unless he has unless he has a terrible spring training. And some of his projection numbers through Fangraphs are pretty nice to look at. They just about league average for weighted runs created plus. They think he's going to hit double-digit home runs. The Fangraphs projections have him at 81 games played and 340 plate appearances. I think that's totally fine. And the Rockies have flexibility with Goodman as well because he's still got 2 options left.
Mm-hmm.
So they have flexibility if he struggles or if they need to make some roster changes. But I just don't understand why you would say, or why you would consider, we're only going to have him maybe catch twice a week. Because if you're going to roll forward with Goodman as your backup catcher, then it's like we discussed, you should just do an even split.
Yeah.
He plays 3 games a week at catcher, and the other 2 or 3, you can cycle him at DH or right field or first base or whatever. And I think you do want Goodman's bat in the lineup because, yeah, he's a strikeout guy, but he can punish the ball. And if he can make some of the changes some of his teammates have made, then he could be an incredibly valuable piece. He's not likely to be projected as a 1 or more wins above replacement kind of guy, but you can get 16 to 17 home runs out of him and call that a pretty solid season.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the interesting thing is they're still so hesitant. I think he needs to show us he can be a catcher. And he's looked fine behind the dish. He's not amazing, pretty average, I would say, nothing to write home about exactly, but he's not a detriment behind the plate. But he's not a huge advantage. But at the end of the day, that's really all you need to ask for from catchers. Just don't be a detriment behind there.
And you know what? He got a decent amount of praise from the Rockies pitching staff, especially Kyle Freeland, Freeland's kind of picky sometimes about his backstops. And Freeland had praise for Goodman for the games he called, for his preparation. Like, if you think that he can do it, give him a chance to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just wasting everybody's time, including his.
And that's the thing for me is, he feels so much like a Gary Sanchez type of player or a William Rosario, but kind of opposite where the defense, it's fine. Like, you don't have to worry about it really. He's not the best defender here because that belongs to Drew Romo, who I believe is better. But it's that offense. And part of me is still not entirely sold that he can be exactly the hitter the Rockies want him to be, with extended playing time, because he doesn't walk much at all. That's a problem. He strikes out a bit too much. And he's hit well in the minors, hasn't translated to the big leagues. 13 home runs. Great. Oh, what's that? He has a 290 or 228 on base percentage. So it's boom or bust, a 3 true outcomes type of player. And he doesn't have one of those outcomes as walks. So it's home run or strikeout, and the home runs are few and far in between. I need more. I need more from him as an offensive player.
Yeah, when he's got a career 29.2% strikeout rate and a 4.3% walk rate, it's not great.
Yeah, and you look through those Fangraphs all through his minor league numbers. Like, his lowest number is 18.9% in 2021 in the complex league. That was his lowest strikeout rate. But other than that, it hasn't been below 23%.
Which is also fine if you can consistently punish the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing is, Goody needs to go the Michael Toglia route. Like, Michael Toglia needs to sit down with Hunter Goodman this spring and be like, here's what you got to be doing.
Yeah. Or in a sense, like, you got to give him the Larry Montero route of, you put him in a regular spot, and if it is, get him a good extended look, which they did in 2024. He got into 70 games. And that, but even then, give him a good extended look, and if it doesn't pan out, okay, move on. But it's tantalizing power, but where are you going to put him? And if you're not going to put him behind the dish, if you're going to start him twice a week behind the plate to start the season, which, okay, that makes sense, try to break him in a little bit more to start. But I don't know. Are they trying to justify, like, potentially carrying 3 catchers? And Goodman's kind of in a rotating role where, he could play outfield. He could slide in elsewhere. He can DH, but he can also catch.
I mean, I wouldn't mind that, honestly. Like I said, in an ideal world, I would want Stallings, Romo, and Goodman all on this roster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, in an ideal world, Stallings doesn't come back, and you just roll with the 2 young guys and see which one is going to earn that starting catcher role. And I do understand why they brought Stallings back. I'm not against them bringing Stallings back, but he's not the future of the organization. I think he's going to make a heck of a coach someday, and heck, maybe he'll even be a coach with the Rockies. But right now, he is kind of just a warm, somewhat productive body to put behind the plate.
And which is fine in a year like this.
Yes, but in the future, you don't want that. And the problem is with Goody is you can cycle him around, and he has that quote-unquote positional versatility that the Rockies love so much. But he's not really good at any of those other positions.
Yeah.
He can play them, but no team would want Hunter Goodman as their everyday right fielder.
You're better served putting somebody else there. He can plug in a break glass in case of emergency.
Yeah.
But if he starts hitting well, then you swallow that and you're like, okay, we'll
deal with it.
Move him around. We can deal with it. But when he's not hitting, it becomes a little easier to all right, well, he'll just start twice a week and we'll see what we can get there. And then if it doesn't work out, type of thing. But they got to figure out what to do with him and just let it ride, because you can look at those minor league numbers. Yeah, they're great. but they're still just that. They're minor league numbers.
Yeah.
And when push comes to it, it's a big leap from the minor leagues to the big leagues. And in his short bit of big league playing time, about 90 some odd games, still hasn't quite adjusted to it yet.
Yeah. I mean, if I were building this lineup, if I set the lineup card every day, what I would do is Hunter Goodman, 3 games a week at catcher, and maybe 1 game at DH and 1 game in right field. So he's playing 5 games a week, gets his off day, and you're still cycling him around, but you're giving him the opportunity to develop skill sets at all of those positions, but you're focusing on the most important one, which is catching, and giving him plenty of opportunities to hit.
Yeah.
And then if that doesn't work out, if he doesn't show improvement or anything like that throughout the first month or 2 of the season, then you option him to AAA. Give him things to work on. It's the Michael Toglia treatment of you are optioned. Here is what you need to work on. You want to stick to this big league roster? Here's what you got to do.
Yeah. And don't worry, he'll be back. Regardless, he can get more playing time when Chris Bryant goes on the IL halfway through April. So
halfway through the first game.
Spring training. Like a Simpsons joke where the guy throws the pitch and, well, his season's over.
I hate to say it, but I would not be surprised at all if Bryant gets hurt during spring training.
The bar is low. But yeah.
Way low.
But that's Goodman. And we won't expand too much here because it kind of all tied into what we're talking about with Goodman. But Drew Romo, real quick, it seems like the assumption is that Goodman, like you're saying, it will be the backup catcher. He'll be the second catcher on the roster. I think that's what they're gearing up for. And I'll read this from Thomas Harding, who wrote up an article over on MLB.com on February 10th. Titled here is how the Rockies' opening day roster may shape up. With catchers, he says Stallings resigned after showing that he can be effective offensively and defensively while playing in half the games. Goodman found consistency with the bat as last season progressed, and he can move to the outfield for some more playing time. Drew Romo, the team's number 8 prospect in 2024, had a strong season at AAA, Albuquerque, but he must show significant throwing improvement to convince the Rockies to carry 3 catchers. And again, I keep pounding the desk. Why are we making such a big deal about the way he throws back to the pitcher?
Yeah, and it's the hypothetical of, it could cause problems. But
has it?
It really hasn't so far. It hasn't in AAA. In his limited playing time in the bigs last year, it really didn't. And that's something that you can work on during the regular season. Like, it's not something that you have to not let him play in order to work on.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I still don't like the idea of putting Goodman over Romo because Romo, I think, is all-around the better catching future of a more well-rounded player, whereas Goodman is the power first. And, Romo has had a good offensive season, and there's still plenty to like about his glove. Like, a really good glove can throw when he's throwing out throwing out runners. Yeah, there's no worries about his throwing then. But just because his little throwback to the pitcher makes old people ruffle their feathers and people online freak out about it, it's
very strange.
I don't agree with it.
So many baseball players have weird quirks about their game. Be it a bizarre batting stance, weird habits, a weird way they throw, a weird way they catch. And that's just kind of part of the idiosyncrasies of having, a roster full of 26 guys who are all their own individual and unique people. And for Drew Romo, it's like, is the way that he throws back to the mound weird? Yeah, it's weird, but it doesn't really affect much else.
Yeah.
He can throw to the bases fine. Defensively, he is sound. And yes, he needs to work on his hitting. And if you're holding this one weird thing that can be improved upon against him and using that to justify keeping him off of the roster instead of actually trying to develop this kid that's been in your minor league system since 2020, that's a problem.
Yeah. And like, it's fine if he does get sent to Albuquerque to start the year, but with that pure focus of, okay, like this is something they can work on through camp specifically, but if it has to, okay, we want these real in-game situations in AAA so you can work on that, that's perfectly fine, but don't let that be the whole reason that you don't bank on him for the future. Because you thought highly of this kid, he's moved up through the system, is a good ball player.
Good head on his shoulders, too. We talked to Drew Romo. He's a smart, mature kid who, I like him a lot. And does he have stuff to work on? Of course he does.
Well, who doesn't?
He's 23 years old and made his big league debut last year. Big things for him is it's the walk rate and the strikeout rate, just like pretty much any other player, and that's going to come with playing time and pitch recognition.
Yeah. But so real quick here, his projections before we move on in what's already turned out to be another long episode. Projections, they have him around 60 games, a 250 average, somewhere around there. Zips or Steamer has him at 291 on base, 390 slugging, 75 weighted runs created plus. So sleep below average, but small sample size thus far for him in his career. And so there's a bright future still. He needs to prove on the walks. K percentage, the projections have him at like 21, 22%. That's league average. So he's there. A batting average on balls in play around 290. There's a lot to like with Romo. So don't give up on the kid and let the weird little thing, the little quirk of throwing back to the pitcher, which he knows about it. And he's been trying to work on it for years. But that's a small little aspect of the game that should not prevent him from getting a good look at some point in 2025.
Definitely.
He is the catcher of the future. Hunter Goodman is not. As much as we like the guy, he is not the catcher of the future.
Yeah,
Willeen Rosario was not the catcher of the future for the Rockies.
Goody rules. I love the guy. But if you made me pick between who I wanted to see more behind the plate in a Rockies uniform in 2025, I'm going to pick Drew Romo.
Mm-hmm. And this has nothing to do with me making him my primary catcher immediately in out of the park baseball in my franchise. And he immediately became a 5-star overall player. And I signed him to a big extension, and he has continually delivered. Now in the year 2032.
Uh-oh, the asteroid's about to hit.
He's 31 years old, and he's still performing at a very high level. Hunter Goodman worked as my kind of platoon and then became a backup. Unfortunately, didn't pan out. And the simulation never lies, Evan.
Yep, it's 100% accurate.
Charlie Condon is going. The Rockies are going to win back-to-back World Series in 2027 and 2028.
Thanks to Charlie Condon.
Yeah, thanks to Charlie Condon, who won the MVP multiple years in a row. He's kind of tailed off a little bit, but he's still very high average, but his home runs are slowing down a bit.
Yeah, happens with age.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, so yeah, that's the catching position. Those three guys are really the ones in the mix. There'll be others that'll flip in at times, but those are your bulk ones and expectations for them. But we'll take a break here. When we come back, we'll finish things out talking about the bullpen unit as a whole. So don't go anywhere. Plenty left to go here on Affected by Altitude. Back here on Affected by Altitude, Skyler and Evan closing things out here. The bullpen, which I'm going to kind of say, and the part I'm most intrigued by the Rockies, position-wise, coming into 2025, unlike all the other positions, because it seems like the one that's actually getting the youth infusion, or at least the exciting fusion, a new face, I think more or less, than what we've had in the past. But overall, a little optimistic about that group.
Yeah, the Rockies bullpen is one of the major parts of the team where like the youth movement has been sort of an all-around thing, but the bullpen, especially in the second half of last season, really got that infusion of young talent in Luis Peralta, Seth Halverson, Angel Chivi, and it's going to keep getting younger. I don't think we're not going to see as many of, your journeyman minor league emergency backup relievers, Matt Cook, Jeff Hartley, John Curtis, a bunch of the other guys that made appearances last year. And when you look at the guys who are set to be in the bullpen, really the two oldest guys are Justin Lawrence and Tyler Kinley.
Mm-hmm.
And, Kinley is the elder statesman of the group, and he started to really flash getting back to his old self in the second half of last year. It was a tough start for him. He had a bad first half, but then he really started turning around and went, okay, this looks a lot more like the TK we know and love. And every bullpen needs an elder statesman type pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you ever want a bullpen that is exclusively really young guys, because you need a guy who's going to be the leader and who's going to be the voice of experience and reason in that bullpen. That being said, once you got one of those guys, you don't really need to load up on other ones, which is why I'm hoping the Rockies don't do something like, say, bring back Daniel Bard or go and find another veteran reliever, because I really don't think they actually need to go and find another veteran reliever right now, especially in the situation that they're in, where this is not a year that's expected to be competitive. It's a development year. So let the kids develop.
Yeah. And coming into the year, here's what their staff is projected to look like. You got Tyler Kinley, Seth Halverson, Luis Peralta, Victor Vodnik, Anil Chivi, Justin Lawrence, Lucas Gilbreth, Tanner Gordon. And that long relief role, I think, is the one that's going to be the most influx. It could be someone from the rotation if they actually follow through with Dollander. It could be Carson Palmquist cutting his teeth at the big league level. It could be Bradley Blaylock. Any number of some of those starters who can fill in that swingman role. Anthony Molina even taking back his spot. Let's see. Let's check. Ty Block, what's he doing?
He is unsigned.
Are we sure?
Yes.
Are we positive he's not hanging around?
Don't worry, there's time. He's probably just like standing outside the gates at Salt River, just like looking really sad with his hands on the fence. Be like,
can I play?
Guys, let me in. Now, Ty Block, actually, he's a guy. So really interesting. Now here's a guy. So Matt Carasidi, journeyman reliever, rejoined the Rockies in 2023 and 2024, was about to retire in 2023 before being brought back. Really cool story. Just retired and became a pitching coach with the High A Everett Aqua Sox in the Seattle Mariners organization. And you know what? I think Ty Block would make an excellent pitching coach. I do. But I don't want us to sign him to actually pitch.
Yeah.
I love Ty. I love the little cat. He's a great guy. His teammates have always loved him. He's been immensely respectful to everyone he's played with at every level. Very well liked. We have been down that road too many times. Don't. Please. There are so many other options for your long reliever role.
Yeah. So, but still, as a unit, you can look at over on roster resources, what I'm looking at, some of the projections they show. A lot of high ERAs, most of them in the 4s, the high 4s. Lowest one would be, they have projected, is Victor Vodnik with a 4.44 ERA. But in that, basically a bullpen unit around the 4.5 area.
Which probably would be a tremendous improvement over last year.
Yeah, not too shabby.
Yeah.
And then most of them with a walk per 9, a little under 4, maybe around 4. Angel Chivi comes in at 3.36. Among the regular relievers, this isn't counting the long reliever. He comes in with that lowest. Both Halverson and Kinley also just under 4. And then the K per 9, you have Kinley coming in at 9.42. Seth Halverson, 8.27. Peralta, 8.92. So somewhere in between 8 and 9.
Yeah. If you want my honest opinion, the major non-rookie to watch this year in the bullpen is going to be Lucas Gilbreth. He is that all-important lefty reliever, and he showed some real good flashes before he got injured. And you can sort of see, in the season that he got injured, he's doing really good. And then his performance tanked after he got hurt. And then he was out pretty much all of last season and just really struggling to come back. Right now, Bud Black says he is all systems go for spring. They are considering him fully healthy and ready to rock and roll. And he's going to be really important in this bullpen, especially a bullpen that doesn't have a whole lot of lefties. In terms of lefties in the bullpen, you've really only got Lucas Gilbreth and potentially Evan Justice and Luis Peralta.
Yeah, and I also just noticed, looking at the roster projection, they didn't include Jimmy Herget.
Herget's going to be interesting. I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm still not sure what to make of him, but I am curious to see. And I do think he starts the season in the bullpen. I do think he makes the opening day roster.
Yeah, because looking beyond that projected group, there's also options. Jaden Hill, another hard-throwing righty. You got Jeff Criswell, who he's a little late to the party, but performed well. He can swing into that long relief role too, as the history as a starter. Then Evan Justice, who had a good, solid year in the Arizona Fall League. And then Jake Bird, who's still in there, but still a worthy one. Then Jimmy Herget. Those core guys that are on the 40-man, there's interesting names in there. A lot of, I think that's the projection here, and like that overall is the expectation that the Rockies bullpen is going to be more power oriented. Hunting the strikeout, high octane stuff to overpower hitters instead of the long history of maybe we'll have one hard throwing guy and then the rest we'll have our soft tossing guy. We'll have our all of them sink ballers type of thing. They're changing. They're kind of going one prototype, but variations of that same prototype with the power pitcher.
They've been better at varying it up. What I will say is I will be very disappointed if the entire rookie trio last year of Peralta, Halverson, and Criswell do not make the opening day bullpen, because they all pitched between 12 to 15 games last season. And in that auditionary period for them, I was impressed. I was very impressed. Jeff Criswell, I think, doesn't get talked about enough for how much he impressed me, where he really only had that one bad game where he went up against the Yankees and they kicked his butt. And I'm sorry, but against the three hitters that he faced off, that's just going to happen, especially when the day previously he blanked them. Like he had 12 appearances with 13 appearances with an ERA of 2.75. And this is a guy who had been honestly struggling a pretty decent amount in AAA, especially as a starter. Very, very high ERA, just having a tough time with it. And the only game where he went up and gave up multiple runs was that August 25th game against the Yankees, where he gave up 3 straight home runs. Yeah, that hurts. He gave up one other home run the entire rest of the season, and that was against the Dodgers, another very good group of hitters.
Yeah, and I'm trying to look up. Here's what Thomas Harding has for his projected bullpen, so to speak. In the relief pitchers, he's got Victor Vodnik, Seth Halverson, Tyler Kinley, Justin Lawrence, Lucas Gilbreth, Luis Peralta, Jake Bird, and Anil Chiviyi. So that's where he sits with those relievers. Makes sense. Like that fits in pretty well. Who knows what they're going to do, if they're going to figure out what to do with their long reliever or whatnot. Or I'm sure one of these guys are going to force into being their multiple inning reliever again. But
and non-roster invites, there's really not a whole lot there in terms of guys who I think have a big shot to make the opening day roster. There are some interesting names. Like, I'm really interested to see what Jack O'Loughlin does in spring training, but
Jeffrey
I don't
Yon.
think he makes the team. Jeffrey Yon, the same. I think he's got a shot, but I think he's more likely to start in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Tommy Doyle is a pretty known quantity at this point. Really, the only guy for me in spring training this year for bullpen guys where it's I have to see how this is must watch, must know, must follow, is Zach Agnos. The organization is very high on him. There's a lot of stuff coming out of camp that he has a legitimate shot to make the bullpen if he can impress in spring training. And I have been extremely impressed with both his work and his mindset throughout the minor leagues. I love Zach Agnos. And if he ends up on this team this year, it'll be very well deserved, in my opinion.
Yeah. And that brings up, like, real quick here, like, guys that could be on the chopping block. I feel like we've talked about it before, so we won't dive into it too much. Harding points out, Jimmy Herget, since he doesn't have an option, will have to fight his way into the bullpen. It's not a given he's going to make it. But I think Justin Lawrence and Jake Bird, even Tyler Kinley, like, everybody in the bullpen is fighting for their job. There'll be guys with a little bit more security, but a bullpen is so volatile. Guys can be good one year and then just absolutely horrendous the next year. Again, see Justin Lawrence, Tyler Kinley. So nothing should be certain. You can get a good idea of who should be in there, but they should still, with so many options for those 8 spots, nothing should certainly be said, which is a benefit you have with a younger bullpen with guys with options, because these are interchanging throughout the season. No guy needs rest. We'll send him down to AAA because we just need a fresh arm here for a week.
And somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Like, it's inevitable. I'm not wishing it on anybody, but you just know the Rockies will not go a full season without a pitcher having an IL stint. That's just how baseball goes.
But overall, Evan, what would you say your expectation is with just the bullpen unit as a whole this season?
If the bullpen can post as a unit a sub-5 ERA, even if it's like 4.92, I'll be over the moon.
The thing for me is securing the back end of the bullpen.
Yes, your 7, 8, 9 guys. I really want to see someone grab that closer spot and never let go.
Yeah, because that was a big problem for the Rockies last season. Honestly, they were better. They should have had more wins. Problem was they blew so many games late because of the bullpen. The bullpen played a big part in why this team lost 100-plus games, really the last 2 seasons, because I think of August and September games where the bullpen blew games late and really made the difference of why the Rockies lost as many games as they did. The team was still terrible as a whole, still was going to lose high 90s, but they could have averted that a little bit more, because you don't blow those games, you get maybe a little better roll.
And that's the problem when you have, a bullpen when you have a closer by committee, when you do late innings by committee. The Rockies had 21 different pitchers credited with a game finished on Baseball Reference. And the guy who had the most was TK. And he also came out with the most saves at 12. And then you had Jalen Beeks with 9 saves, Victor Vodnik with 9 saves, Justin Lawrence with 2, Seth Halverson with 2, and then Chevier, Bird, and Cook with 1 each. But the Rockies overall only had 37 saves, which I think is one of the lowest in the league. I'll need to check really quick.
Yeah, something like that. But while you do that, it's just anchoring down the back end of the bullpen and realizing that, maybe we can have a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, a 6th through 9th inning guys, a path to victory. If you get a lead or you just need your arms moving forward, just my expectation is just living up to that hype. Let the youth develop, like you're saying. Let them fly high, make that bullpen their own, and change the stigma of pitching at Coors Field or pitching for the Rockies, is that the bullpen can be elite.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, another big point is that how many games did the Rockies have that they really needed the closer to get a save? But the Rockies are bottom 10 in the league in saves last year. They are tied for the Philadelphia Phillies with the Philadelphia Phillies at 37 saves. The team with the fewest saves, unsurprisingly, is the Chicago White Sox at 21 and the Miami Marlins at 33.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another thing, though, is that you want to have more close games this year, less blowouts. But then when you have a close game, you want to have a guy that you can be confident sending up to the mound and go, you know what, he's got this.
Yeah. No, if you're trailing, you don't want a reliever to go in and make things worse, to make a comeback even harder. Or on the tail end, you don't want a guy to come in and make things worse by cutting your lead down to where you have a little breathing room. So a lot of things, but high expectations for the bullpen, or at least excitement for him. High excitement.
Skyler, who would you say is your guy that you are most excited to watch in the bullpen this year?
Seth Halverson, baby.
That is the correct answer. Mm-hmm. I love Seth Halverson. And there's a lot of guys I'm really high on, but Seth is probably my favorite right now.
Yeah, of a guy projected to be in that bullpen, he's the one that I'm like,
yeah,
yes.
He's a big boy with a big fastball and good breaking pitches.
Yeah.
Like he's not just, he'll burn your eyebrows off with the gas. He'll effortlessly throw 102 miles per hour on his fastball. And then he'll throw like a nasty changeup or something.
Yeah. Like I know the Rockies view him as a setup, like an 8th inning guy, which is perfectly fine. Like sometimes you need them there, but I think when it comes to like a pitching by committee, because you're always going to need another guy to pitch in the 9th because you can't send the same closer out every single day. But no, between him, Vodnik, and Kinley, those are the 3 I'd like to see get those save opportunities. And then GVE as needed. Matchup, but have a set guy.
Yeah.
But be smart about it. Bud Black, be smart about it.
I think I agree with you where if I had to pick 3 guys that are fighting for the closer spot, I think Kinley starts the year as the closer. Mm-hmm. Just because he is that elder statesman. But I think Halverson and Vodnik should both be given the opportunities to close games. And if Agnos is ever up on the roster this year, I want him to be getting save opportunities.
Yeah. Well, it's like I go back to talking about out of the park baseball when you're setting up your pitching, your bullpen staff, and you can set their role and then how often they should be used. And then the backup role they can do. So like, the setup guy, well, he has the alternate role. He can also be a closer. So he'll close games when the other guy's tired and you need someone to close a game. That guy can do it. So hopefully the Rockies have those kinds of charts and their depth charts, so to speak, of, okay, Kinley's our number 1 closer. Well, he's thrown 40 pitches over these last 2 games. Okay, then Halverson's our closer tonight. And then you just plug and play like that. We shall see. But yeah, bullpen, fun stuff, exciting. That'll be a fun one to watch in spring training. There's a lot of options and hopefully a lot of competition. And we'll see who sinks and who swims. Like comes down to it, like a Lawrence or heck, even a Kinley, or just not doing really good. The Rockies seriously consider, maybe we should put somebody else in there. But who knows? We'll see all these guys at various points through the year as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm. But that'll do it here for this edition of Affected by Altitude. As always, we appreciate you tuning in, hanging out, listening to us. We wish you could be hanging out with us, but maybe if we ever do live episodes, we shall see.
Or you could come to the Purple Row opening day breakfast that we're trying to get set up over on purplerow.com.
Mm-hmm. I will not be there, but I think Evan might be.
I will be there.
There you go. But follow along. Evan, where can the folks find you?
You can find me over on Blue Sky at EvanLang27. Would love to hear from you. Also catch me over on purplerow.com doing the Monday Rock Piles. This week, if you haven't already read it, you are probably seeing me write about a where are they now of the 19 different players that moved on from the Rockies at some point during last season or over this off season where they ended up. Also should be starting up this week, the weekly Pebble Report, as everyone is reporting to camp. There's actually going to be things to weekly talk about in terms of our Pebbles, so keep an eye out for that. Remember that you can always find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, be it Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or Spotify. If you listen on any of those platforms, we would very much appreciate you leaving us a review. 5 stars would be awesome, but we're not going to force you to do so. And then you can always find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on social media, including YouTube for the video versions of our podcast, at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKYMTN Rooftop.
Nice. Find me over on the Twitters at Skyler Timmons, and then over on Blue Sky at STimmons13. Then find me right in the Wednesday Rock Piles and writing stuff over at fansfirstsports.com. Now that Rockies season has actually started, you'll probably see more Rockies content coming from me for Fans First, which is pretty nice. It gets hard covering random MLB stuff and competing for that, but nobody's writing Rockies stuff, Evan. Only me for Fans First.
You are Skyler Timmons, the exclusive Colorado Rockies source on Fans First Sports Network.
More or less.
You gotta sink your teeth in that advertising opportunity.
I cover the team, so you don't have to. But as always, you can find us every week here. And again, as we get into spring training, we'll keep brainstorming stuff, figuring out how we can do some fun stuff and get some varied content throughout the season. So stick around, and as always, let us know some suggestions down in the comments. I think you can leave comments both here on YouTube and your favorite podcasting platform, all that good stuff. But until next time, I'm Skyler, that's Evan. This has been Affected by Altitude. Farewell. This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.